without you really taking care of yourself, none of it really matters. Because I literally thought I was going to die that night. Like, I had a moment in my head where I was like, and it's not like, life flashes before your eyes. It was just kind of a moment of acceptance, like, oh, this is how I die.
Welcome to the DesignRush podcast. I'm your host, Vianca Meyer. In this episode, we're thrilled to have Jinny Oh, an innovator in the field of UI UX and retired CEO and owner of WANDR, joining us. We'll delve into the intricate landscape of remote work, what it means to be a leader, about safeguarding your mental health in business, and so much more. Jinny's insights promises to be raw and transformative. Remember to like and subscribe to our podcast for more insightful conversations with leading figures in design and technology. And let's welcome Jinny to start this exciting journey together. Okay, Jinny, so thank you so much again and welcome to the DesignRush podcast. I mean, we are so eager to get your insights into the world of WANDR, which I know you mentioned you're not really a CEO, but more of an owner now, and UI UX and, things about remote work. And just, we're so happy to dive into everything with you. But before we do that, I'd really like to talk a little bit more about your experiences and how they shaped you into the creative leader that you are today. So now your story is obviously like a tapestry of varied experiences. So I'd like us to start at the beginning. So could you introduce yourself to the audience and perhaps share a moment with us from your early life that, ignited your passion for creativity? I mean, was there a mentor or an experience that set you on this path that you're on now?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. My life journey to where I am today is definitely quite unconventional compared to maybe some other agency owners. And where or how I got to, being a creative person is definitely a lot to do with my upbringing and having to move around a lot. I think I was kind of left to my own demise to figure out how to create my own fun and have my own exploratory phases. And I think through that, I was using my imagination, trying to explore internally and also with the things around me, figuring out how to have fun, how to make new friends. And so exploration has always been a really big part of who I am. And I think that gets reflected on the type of work that I like to go into. So wanting to create my own company and then going into design. And now I'm actually going into the music industry. So everything about my life is about exploring, and creativity just kind of goes hand in hand with that.
Incredible. So, I mean, in that sense, you're going to the music industry. Wait. Let's just quickly stop there. What are you doing in the music industry now?
Yeah, so
a woman of many talents, apparently.
It's funny because music is actually quite, I would say it's a really easy transition from learning design to going into music, especially when you do music production. You'll notice that so the tools that the producers use, the concept of it is very similar to Figma or Sketch or Adobe, where you have a lot of different tools and these create different edits within what you're trying to do. You have to do layering. So once you learn the tool, it becomes easier. So I would say the transition from design to music was quite simple, but how I got here is a different story. It wasn't like I woke up one day and I was like, oh, I'm going to do music. It was started a few years ago where I was just so burned out. I didn't want to work anymore. I just felt like every step I was taking to grow the business was just eating me up inside. It just felt like I couldn't go any further. So I went through my whole burnout period and started making a lot of different changes within the organization for the leadership team to really own and take accountability to step in on my behalf. And I was able to gracefully leave the company and bring in a CEO and a COO. Spent the last year and a half literally decompressing and doing a ton of soul searching. Like, I don't know, there were days where I would wake up and I was like, I don't know what to do with my time, and I don't know what the purpose of life is. And somehow stumbled upon music, and it was totally random too. Like, I was in Ibiza with my friends, and I saw this group called Bedouin perform, and I was like, wow, like I love being on this side and partying and dancing, but I think I want to be like where they're at, where they're performing. Like, why am I here? I want to be there. And that was about a year ago, and I've been gradually like spending more and more time performing, or not even performing, just mixing and producing music.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, it's wonderful that you were able to like pivot your career or pivot into something that also makes you happy. But one thing that I want to talk about though is the burnout that you mentioned as well. The burnout and the fact that you, as a leader, were able to, as you said, gracefully step away and put other people in place that could handle things like appointing a new CEO and COO. I think you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, right? So my first question would be is how I think this is something we all struggle with actually, but how did you manage to recognize the burnout that you were facing, and how did you then go about fixing that? I mean, I know that it must be more nuanced than just being like, okay, I'm going to do this. I mean, there must have been like a strategy in place to, as you say, gracefully step away and allow people to step in for you. And also, on another note, how did you deal with the burnout while you were doing that?
Yeah, I'll start with the second question. I think a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to this part, which is, you're just on survival mode. Um, you have work that's consistently piling up on you, and you can't really stop even if you want to. So at some point you start to feel like you're being dragged like on a concrete pavement, and you can't walk anymore. So you're literally just being dragged by the forces of the work that you have to do. Um, and it's a life choice, right? Like, we all choose to go down this entrepreneur path because there's some innate part of us, and maybe it's the crazy in us that's like, oh, I want to do something that's different, that's harder than what most people do in society. Like, most of society, they'll go get a job and they get their paycheck, and they put in the hours, they get promotion, and that's the usual route. And I think the crazy ones are like, let's not go the easy route. Let's go eat glass, and let's go uh, figure out this journey that no one really knows what they're doing. So in the burnout period, it's just you take it day by day. And some days, like, I just didn't want to even get out of bed. Like, I saw the bills piling up. I saw the client emails. I saw the employee emails. Like, everyone wants something from you. And you're like, I don't even have time for myself. And I think that was the biggest realization, was one day waking up and like looking at myself in the mirror and seeing like, when did I age this much? And of course, like, if people are watching this, they're like, you look so young. And yes, of course, I'm still young, but compared to like when I started the company, I saw myself in the mirror and I was like, I look like I aged so much, and I don't even know when the time had all passed. Um, so I think that was the first recognition, is like, I don't even recognize the person in the mirror anymore. And the second is just consistently being unhappy. Like, everything I was trying different things. I was going to retreats. I was trying to like learn about how to be happy. I was reading all these books and like, anything and everything to do self development on how to be happy. And nothing was really working. And then the third thing, and this is like, I hope no one ever gets to this part, was my health was in critical condition. I just woke up. Like this was like middle of the night. I woke up with excruciating pain, and I was just kind of passing in and out of consciousness. And My boyfriend at the time had to call 911. I got rushed to the hospital on an ambulance. Ended up having to get my gallbladder removed. And, I didn't even realize that there was something wrong with me. And the reason why my gallbladder had to be removed was because I just was not taking care of my body. Like I was eating whatever was easiest and fastest because I was spending all my time working. And that was the first really big wake up call for me in realizing that, like, without your health, without you really taking care of yourself, none of it really matters. Because I literally thought I was going to die that night. Like I had a moment in my head where I was like, and it's not like, life flashes before your eyes. It was just kind of a moment of acceptance, like, oh, this is how I die. And that was really scary for me. And when I came home from the hospital, I realized, like, okay, I need to start making some really drastic changes. Otherwise, I will die this way.
I mean, that is real as hell for you to say all of that, to be honest. And I think not a lot of people actually are as open about the struggles that they face. Okay, you obviously went through an ordeal, and I think that there were a lot of things that pointed into the direction like you need a big change, right? So, just again, what did that process look like for you? I mean, there was, I mean, first of all, what was the hardest parts, I think, about managing a business? And then second of all, again, like, how did you pivot or like go into changing what the company structure is going to be to make that better for yourself and your health?
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for this framework called EOS. So it stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. And they're an organization that teaches you how to structure your company in a way where your leadership team really steps up, not just your leadership team, sorry, like your entire organization, to take full ownership and accountability of what they need to do to move the progress forward, to move the company forward. And they also help you implement what they call traction. So what are the measurables that are really important for your company to know that everyone's moving in a singular direction and in the right direction? So we've been working with what they call an implementer. So these are people who are trained by the EOS organization to work with you every quarter, and they do a full day workshop with you to make sure that you're on track. You review your last 90 days, what went wrong, what went right. What do you need to do for the next 90 days to make sure that you are still on target to meet your annual goals, to meet your 3-year goals and your 10-year vision. So we started working with an implementer, I think, towards end of 2020. So now we're coming up on a little over 3 years of implementing EOS, and that has been such a game changer for me, and I'm a huge advocate for them. They don't sponsor me to say that. I just love them so much. And yeah, I think every entrepreneur should at least look into how to run your leadership team meetings. And they have a bunch of videos on YouTube and books as well. A lot of resources, a lot of free resources that entrepreneurs can take a look at. But it just helped add a lot of structure that I wasn't even considering. I think when you're on the entrepreneur journey, especially as a young entrepreneur, and I didn't have a full-time job prior to starting my company. And so everything for me is new. So not having learned how to organize and manage and lead a team, like everything's just kind of like go, learn on the spot. And EOS really showed me a new way of one, organizing people, people management, and two, how to better structure what's important, so that like you can go towards your bigger vision as opposed to being in the grind and worrying about every detail. And then, sorry, one more thing. I think you asked as well, like, what's the hardest part? And to me, and they also go over this during EOS sessions, is as a leader and as a founder, the hardest part is letting go, because you always want to do things your way. And at least for me, like for the longest time, I thought like my way was the best way. So it's learning to let go that things are not going to be perfect and things are not going to always be done the way that I want it to. But in order to really scale and in order to grow people, you have to learn to let go and trust that you've hired the right team and get the fuck out of their ways.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, why are you hiring people if you're not going to trust them to do their job?
Exactly.
So, okay, would you then say that entrepreneurs who maybe stay away from like getting the perfect results, right? Could they still, or stay away from perfectionism to get the perfect results? I mean, could they still achieve, success in that, or get really good results rather?
I think it's important to know what you value the most. Every entrepreneur is different, right? Like I know certain creative entrepreneurs who also run agencies, by the way, that are perfectionists in their craft. And so for them, what's most important is delivering the best work that they can. I operate a little bit differently, where I love the creative side. I love, I love the art that's being produced. But at the same time, I'm here to run a business, So to me, 80% of perfection is good enough. Obviously, I would love to strive for more. And it took me a very long time to even get to the mindset that I have today, because I wanted everything to be perfect. But I also realized that if I want everything perfect, then it's not a scalable business. It's just a one-man show that with, a bunch of freelancers that's helping me craft my vision and artistry. So I think to be a scalable entrepreneur, you for sure need to let go of that perfectionist mindset.
Yeah, exactly. So, I like the fact that you say that you're happy with 80% of, you know, 80% there. And I think, for us at DesignRush, we try to employ that as well. Because there is like this sense that you're trying to put out, sometimes I think, quantity over quality. And maybe this isn't so true for design necessarily. But, what do you feel about businesses these days actually focusing more on the quantity of content going out as opposed to the quality of it going out? I mean, do you think that, just having something that's good enough to be out there is fine? Or do you think it should change at some point where you actually do start focusing more on the quality?
Mm. That's a really good question. Because I'm gonna make a reference to, I believe it's a Harvard research study where there was a professor who conducted an experiment with his students, and he had one class where he asked the students, it was, and sorry, my reference is a little bit foggy. I can't remember if it was a pottery class or a photography class, but it was one of those. And he asked the students to, one class, he asked them to produce the highest quality piece of work and submit that before the end of the semester. And that's what they're going to be graded on, just one piece of work. And then he told his other class that they're going to be graded on the quantity, that the more that they produce, the higher their grades are going to be. And at the end of the semester, what's interesting is that the class that was given the task of quantity actually even ended up with better quality than the class that was going to be graded on the overall quality. So, when you look at something like that, you almost want to encourage your team and businesses to always strive for quantity.
Now, I want to get back a little bit more to your leadership, right? So you mentioned earlier in our very quick conversation before we started the podcast that you obviously stepped away from, being the CEO of WANDR, and you then went as more of an owner, right? So what does that role of leadership look like to you now? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And also, in doing so, elaborate a little bit more on what WANDR does, and how the overall structure of the company looks like, and just your daily life, really.
So, as for WANDR, yeah, we've changed so much over the years, and I've changed so much with it too. So I started the company just kind of on accident. This was 2012, 2013 or something like that. I was working on a startup, a fintech startup. I was still a student at the time. I didn't know anything about anything. But I had this vision to build out this mobile fintech company, trying to digitalize receipts and collect consumer data and things like that. I don't even know where the idea came from, but I was like, oh, I have this great idea. I'm going to just keep pursuing it. I did that for about a year and a half while I was still in school. And, when you're 22, you really don't know anything about anything. So I ended up having to fold that startup because it just, everything I was doing just felt like I was hitting a brick wall. But I came out of it with all this knowledge of how to build a tech startup, or at least how to build an MVP for a startup. And so I started freelancing when I moved to LA. I was trying to launch the startup in China and then came to LA. I started working with other startups doing a whole variety of freelance work. I did everything from copywriting, social media marketing, UX design, web development, anything and everything that a startup needs. I was also doing a lot of weird, odd jobs on the side too, styling for photo shoots and personal assistant work, just scraping by, living the LA life. And I was doing that for about a year and a half until I realized that there was a need for UX design, especially with startup founders wanting to create their initial prototype. I saw a lot of challenges with that. The same stories I was hearing over and over again from founders has been that we've spent, X amount of months, even years, and tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to build this prototype, and we're still not in the market. So that was a very, very common story that I kept hearing, and so I thought to myself, well, it takes me a day to create a prototype. Why is it taking them months, even years, to build something that takes me a day, maybe a week to do? So I started doubling down on my UX design services. Then, hired another freelancer to help me refine the work that I was doing, because I knew I was a good UX designer, but I was not a great UX designer. So I was hiring freelancers that to me looked like they were years ahead of me to help refine the work that I was delivering to the clients. And then, one client turned to 3 clients, one freelancer turned to 3 freelancers, and the agency just kind of grew from there. So it was this mosh posh of trying to make things work, trying to acquire different clients. And so those were the early days, just working with a ton of startups, a lot of founders, to now we've grown into a much more sophisticated agency where we're we're working directly with the US Air Force, as an example of one of our largest clients. We're doing enterprise software. We're working with really high security stake clients. And a lot of that was just, growing with the leadership team, expanding my own capabilities as a leader, and coming to today and just going back to your question of like, what is my leadership style, especially moving to the owner's box, is just really, really empowering the leaders that I have on the team now. And like, what does that even look like? I think a lot of people, when you get into new roles, you have imposter syndrome, right? Like, am I even good enough to be sitting where I am? And I for sure had that for the longest time. And I know that, when you step into a leadership role, as did a lot of the people on my team did, like they went from being a designer to now they're leading the design team. And then they went from leading the design team to now like sitting on the business leadership team. You do get a little bit of that imposter syndrome. So my job now feels more like I'm acting as a soundboard to my team members and encouraging them, like really, really encouraging them to make mistakes. Rather than me sharing my decisions and my ideas, which I still have to catch myself to not do that, because what happens when I impose my ideas is that I then have to follow up and I have to hold accountability to following through with my ideas. So it's about taking a step back and allowing your team to come up with these solutions to whatever problems you're facing, workshopping with them on what that like final solution looks like, and allowing them to then follow through and like, encouraging them to execute on their own ideas and solutions and not imposing your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then I want to ask, just to follow up to that, just lastly on the topic of leadership. If you had to encapsulate what it means to be a leader in a sentence or two, what would you say?
I struggle with this. I laugh because I struggle with it. Like the last 10 years, I had my own imposter syndrome of what a leader is supposed to be. Especially because I started the company so young. Like I just always felt like I wasn't good enough. And I put so much into the team that I wasn't even putting, that same amount of self-love and care into myself. And that's how I went into burnout. So my perspective of real leadership has really, really changed, especially in the last few years through my own personal growth and journey. I thought to be a great leader, and my definition would have been so different 5 years ago. I thought being a great leader means like working late nights and hustling and setting examples through the work that you do. But now I think to be a great leader, you need to expand yourself as a human. And in order to expand yourself as a human, you need to really, there's got to be some element of selfishness. And I think this is why I don't like social media. Like there are so many people in social media who, like Gary Vee, for instance, who are like all about the hustle culture, and you have to put in the long hours, and you're almost like this hero if you're in the grind, and you're a failure if you're not. And I bought into that, and it doesn't work. I think it works to a certain extent, but to take a startup to get to the next level, you need a different type of leadership style. And to get there, you can't just put in the hours on the business side. You have to put in the hours on your personal side, and you have to grow, and you have to know who you are as a person, and then be able to share what you've learned and those experiences with your people. Because yes, they want you as a leader on the work side, but I think people are also looking for a leader on the human side. They want people that understand what they're going through when their laptops are shut off, and when they're going home to their families. Like they want someone that can actually relate to their pain there, and not just the pain that they have at work.
I think a lot of companies these days are waking up to the fact that, you have human beings working in the company. And I think there's, at least from my experience, what I've seen is that I feel like there's a lot more humanness in the way that people manage and are managed. At least I can see that within our company as well. But yeah, anyway. Okay, so I don't know if you know this, Jinny, but we at DesignRush are a key player in connecting businesses with leading agencies, and these are agencies that do things like UI, UX, and web design and branding and things like that. And also, we're a fully remote company as well, if you might not know that. And we work with global agencies. So, Jinny, I want to find out from you, how do you see platforms like DesignRush playing a role in shaping the future of like agency collaborations and especially remote work culture, actually?
I think the world is still looking for like innovators in that space. How do you do remote work where it makes sense? Especially as a company scales, right? Like this is our 7th year, and we're starting to see things fall through the cracks of being a remote first company. Sorry, not fall through the cracks, but we're seeing challenges as we're scaling. So I think, an organization like DesignRush can really set good examples for agencies, for any organizations that are wanting to go remote. Like, what does that even mean? Like, how do you operate? And does that work in the design world where creativity requires collaboration? So, yeah, I think it's in that setting example of like, how do you stay creative?
Yeah, but I think you could say the same for WANDR. I mean, you guys also did a completely remote setting as well, So I think at the end of the day, yes, I think that there's a lot of ways that people can be collaborating these days. So then what is the ideal setting, would you say, in remote work?
I think you have to figure out as an organization and as a team, like, how are you structured? How do you operate? And because if you have an operations problem, it doesn't matter if you're working remotely or even in person, it just doesn't work. And I think that's where a lot of companies don't realize is, when COVID hit, people are like, oh, we have to go remote. And a lot of companies kind of like, they fell through pieces. They just didn't know how to operate remotely. But it wasn't the remote aspect. I think a lot of companies just had flaws in their operations. So if you have really good tight-knit operations, it doesn't matter if your people are in person or you're working, across the globe.
Exactly. I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, as you said, since COVID, I think there was a lot of, I think it brought a lot of stuff forward, in terms of that. But I mean, what is your take on a lot of, say, employees or potential employees wanting to work remotely or at the very least hybrid, and companies kind of like pushing against that? And why do you think companies are pushing against that so much?
Lack of accountability and visibility, right? Like, if you don't have systems in places to check your people, to check like the value that they're bringing, then of course you want them in the office, because at least you can look over their shoulders, not literally, but figuratively. But and this is, I'm going to reference back to EOS. With EOS, you're giving ownership to your people. You're giving them the opportunity to really own the task, own a department, own whatever it is that they're doing, so that it doesn't matter if I see them at the office or I don't hear from them. I know that that's what's on their priority. And if they don't deliver, then, they could have been putting in 100 hour a week. I still know that it just wasn't meeting the mark, as opposed to like, I need you here at the office.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. So you also then mentioned, having systems in place to ensure that, your remote workers are working the way that they should be. So when you say systems, what systems do you mean?
Yeah, so every person in our organization has measurable. Again, this is going back to EOS. So that's that's one part of the system. Like, what are the metrics that they're accountable for? So if we're taking, for instance, the marketing team, then I expect, whoever is leading the marketing department to consistently bring us new leads every week. If they're not, is it the person that's the problem, or is it the process that's the problem? Or, like, you start to dig in, like, where is the root cause of that problem? And even in that example, it's not going to matter if they're in the office or working on the other side of the world from me. I know there's a problem. I know there's a system that's detecting what problem we need to solve. Other systems, we've tried time tracking too. I have, like, I can swing both sides for time tracking. I think it's a really, really great way to know where you're spending money. At some point we were very detailed in how we were time tracking, to a point where we knew how much each meeting was costing us. We had a lot of pushback from our team. So we've changed the model on how we're time tracking, and now we just want to know in general, like it's more time tracking for the purpose of knowing how much our projects are costing versus like every little nitty gritty detail.
Okay, and so what about advice, say for companies just transitioning from, an office environment to a remote setting? What would your advice to those types of companies be? And, in another sense, what is your advice also to those transitioning from the, employees transitioning from the office environment to the home environment?
Setting that clear boundary when you're working remote is so important. Like, do you have another separate office room? If not, do you have at least a corner? Or if you're living in a studio and you have to work from your bed, then like, can you get out of your apartment, or like have some kind of separation, whether it's a physical separation or a mental separation, like putting on a different outfit, putting on makeup, or doing something different that tells you like, okay, from this hour forward, I'm in work mode. And having a schedule is so important. My first year of working with everyone remotely was so hard, because I would just get up whenever I wanted and just kind of start whenever I felt like it. But having a good routine is really important. That's also the hardest thing, because no one's really pushing you to, show up at work at 9 o'clock. You're doing that to yourself. So, one, have a separation. Two, set a routine. And as with anything that you do with life, I think just routine is so helpful. 3, get a, what do you call it? Like a laptop stand, because your neck, like, or even when you're at the office, like that to me has been such a game changer. Like, I used to have horrible neck pain. I would go to the chiropractor, I would go to the acupuncture, like massage, everything, and nothing could cure my neck pain. And once I got the proper ergonomics, like just getting the laptop stand, that in itself helped my pain so much. And if you're working long hours, like, it's worth investing in one. Like, I think they're like $20 on Amazon.
I am telling you, the equipment that you have in your home office, or even as you say, I mean, if you're lucky enough, like I consider myself quite lucky. I'm currently in my office space, and I even have a treadmill right next to my desk, just so I like get up and move, even if it's just for like 5 minutes, that I just get up and quickly have a walk just to move my body. Because I found that just sitting behind my computer, I think we can all get so dazed sitting behind our screens and forget completely. You know, I think one thing that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to remote work is that I find myself distracted by work from doing everything else that needs to be done at home, right? Whereas you would think that it's the complete opposite, where things at home would be distracting you from actually doing your job. It's completely different for me, and I actually know a lot of other remote workers that have the exact same thing going. I mean, it turns you into a complete workaholic. So I think it's a very good thing to, you know, as you said, have a routine and a schedule and taking care of your body and your health for sure.
It's funny because like I think this was like 4 or 5 years ago, we actually brought our entire remote team to Los Angeles for an entire month, and we rented out an office space, and we just did like this like month-long in-person session. And what was interesting was the common thing I heard from my team was, I can't wait to go home to be productive, because they felt like coming into the office 9 to 5 was just not structured for their productivity. So for businesses that are wanting to have their team like coming back into the office, you know, I would say two things. One, like, is that going to be the most productive for your team? Like, look at it from each individual team, not put a blanket statement for the entire company to come into the office. Like, I think every team and within the organization should decide for themselves, like, should we go hybrid? Should we go remote? Like, what works best for us and not for the entire company?
As we begin to wrap up our conversation, I only have 2 more questions for you. Looking ahead, what are your next big steps, you know, professionally and your personal life goals? I mean, can you tell me what that looks like for you in, say, the next 5 years?
Yeah, personal goals is to start performing at festivals. So just really doubling, tripling down on my music career. And I would love to, you know, this time next year, play on a big stage. And then as far as work goes, I would just love to continue to grow my team, and see how that evolves. You know, I have certain key people when I say that in my head, and I want to see how they'll grow, both on the work side and personal side, because I think they just have so much potential. So I'm really excited to see where they take themselves and where they take WANDR in the next 5 years.
Amazing. Okay, and then the second question that I still have to ask you, and just finally, if you could travel back in time and give yourself a piece of life advice at the age of 18, what would it be?
You know, I dropped out of college and then I went back to school. I got pressured by my parents to go back to university after I completed my first year. I was like, I'm done with this shit. I don't want to be here. If I can go back to being 18, I would have not listened to my parents, and I would have stayed out of school. And I wish I started my entrepreneur journey sooner, because school doesn't teach you how to do life. They really don't. So it would have given me a handful of years of not stressing out so much. I hated school so much, and I was stressing out every day. So I wish I could go back and tell my 18-year-old self, like, don't do what other people are telling you to do. Go pave go pave your own life and just go live and experiment, because nobody knows what they're doing. And so just go figure it out on your own and not listen to other people. And one thing, if I can just add on to that question, another really great advice that's been ringing in my head, especially recently, is to not take advice from someone who's not where you want to be at. So I think it's very easy for us to share whatever problems or whatever life situation we're in with the people that are physically the closest to us, right? So if you're 18, you're sharing like where you're at with your life with your parents, and sometimes like you share like relationship problems with your friends, or you talk about work problems with people who have no idea what you do. So, and the people around you care so much about you that they share advice based on their perspective. And a lot of times that is the worst place to take advice. And yet that's where most of us do take advice, is people that are physically the closest to us. So the closing note to that is, don't take advice from people who aren't doing or at where you want to be in life.
Absolutely love that, Jinny. Seriously. And yes, I 100% agree. And I think I read or saw something like that recently too, which I was like, damn right. That makes a lot of more sense than, taking advice from just anybody willy-nilly. But anyway, Jinny, I really thank you so much for joining us today. I have had the best time. And I hope you did too. And I hope maybe in future we can have you back on
I would love
the podcast
that.
if you'd be open to
Yeah,
it.
thank you so much for having me on here. I had a ton of fun.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode with Jinny Oh here at the DesignRush podcast. If you found this episode as enlightening as we did, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the world of design and technology. If your project could benefit from a world-class UI UX agency's expertise, look no further. Head to designrush.com/marketplace. Our carefully curated selection of agencies is equipped to help you navigate the evolving digital landscape and bring your vision to life. Again, I'm your host, Vianca Meyer. Stay curious and join us for the next episode.